Hi, I'm Harold Bell for the Legends of Inside Sports and the Way We Were. On this show, I'm going to take a look at three D.C. mayors in the nation's capital. D.C.'s first black mayor was Walter Washington. Mayor for life, Marion Barry. And today's mayor, Marion Bowser. In 1989, I asked Marion's driver, Officer William Staves, to go into Faces Restaurant, which was an in-crowd hangout in Northwest D.C., and tell the mayor I needed to talk to him. Officer Staves, without hesitation, went into the restaurant and brought the mayor out with him. I warned Marion that law enforcement was going to try to set him up and to step back and stay alert. He said, "Thanks, Harold, I got everything under control." And he went back into the restaurant. Officer Staves, standing nearby, heard the conversation, looked at me and said, "Harold, you tried." The next thing we knew, the bitch had set him up. Let me introduce you to Reverend Torrance Brown as he preaches a sermon on history at Mount Olive Baptist Church in Arlington, Virginia. The next voice you will hear will be that of the late Lou Hankins and Reverend Brown.
And now for Inside Sports, here's Harold Bell. The great scholars and educators teach us three basic dictums about the field of history. One, a people without history is like a tree without roots.
That's right.
Secondly, they who do not know their history are doomed to repeat its mistakes. And thirdly, one page of history is worth more than an entire volume of philosophy. History is the first study of any student in any field, in any school, and in any discipline. When we go to the doctor, if we have not been there before, now the doctor's field might be dermatology, it might be internal medicine, it might be podiatry, but the first thing that that doctor wants from us is a history. When we go to transfer our children to a new school or to take them up to the next level of education, whether their major is chemistry or biology or business, the first thing that the admission officer wants is a transcript that gives that person's history.
Okay. Now I'm told that this appointment of Peter Newsham is a done deal. But I'm here to give you a little history as it relates to police departments in the black community. If this appointment of Peter Newsham is a done deal, then this is the worst kind of politics in a free society. Now understand Murray Che, Phil Mickelson, and Jack Evans' confirmation of Peter Newsham. It is a given when it comes to police brutality. It's not a part of their history. It is foreign to them. But what excuse do the likes of Vince Gray, Ken McDuffie, and Anita Barnes have? In September 2016, shortly after I hosted a police and community relations forum at Ben's Chili Bowl, I warned Mayor Bowser at a fundraiser for Eleanor Holmes Norton that acting chief Peter Newsham was a corrupt cop, and I told her where to look for the corruption. At that same fundraiser, I gave that same information to D.C. City Councilwoman Murray Che. I watched both women put the information in their pocketbooks. They never made an inquiry or responded to my calls regarding Peter Newsham. In December 2016, Fox TV 5 News exposed Newsham for a history of domestic violence against his wife and girlfriends. He denied. The report also said he was found lying dead drunk on the streets with his gun on his side. He admitted, "This is definitely a sign of an alcoholic. He does not need to be chief in the department. He needs to belong to Alcoholics Anonymous. That's where he belongs. He has a whole long history of abusing police power in the department. Evidence has disappeared from the warehouse on his watch. He has been denied chief positions in 2 other cities. It seemed like the DC Council's antennas would have gone up. You know, I am not anti-cop. 2 of my 3 brothers were in law enforcement here in D.C. My oldest brother, Bobby, was a U.S. Marshal for 25 years. And my younger brother, Earl, was a D.C. cop for 14 years. Let me give you a brief history lesson relating to police departments in America and people of color. During slavery, when blacks ran for their freedom from the brutality of slave owners, they were chased by dogs and angry white men with guns, whips, and ropes for lynching. The modern day police departments infiltrated by the KKK, and they brought those same attitudes and tactics with them. The thin blue line and the code of silence were established to protect the cowards and bullies who continue to brutalize black people to this day. When black officers were hired, they went along to get along. What else is new? The KKK is now today's FOP, Fraternity Order of Police. Ask yourself, how many times in the history of law enforcement have you heard the president of the FOP admit that was a bad shooting? Never. Look, make no mistake about it. Policing is a tough job. I would not want to be one. In 1968, I was a member of the Youth Gang Task Force as a roving leader working for DC Recreation and Park during the riots. I was sworn in by my buddy, Assistant Chief Tillman O'Brien, and given a police badge to help me get through police and military barricades that were being set up around the city. Man, I was scared to death. Not of the looters shooting me, but one of those scared-ass cops shooting me. My response to all of you cops crying the blues about how tough the job is and you not appreciate it, remember, you were not drafted into this job. My advice to you, if you're looking for an easy job, get an ice cream truck and sell popsicles and be appreciated by little kids. In Baltimore several weeks ago, the home of the late Freddie Gray, 7 cops were freed in his murder. Too little, too late. The Department of Justice and Just Us held a press conference on the steps of the courthouse and said the Baltimore Police Department is one of the most racist in the country when it comes to black people. Too little, too late again. Last month, 7 Baltimore cops were arrested for racketeering. They were accused of robbing drug dealers for money and drugs, and several innocent law-abiding citizens were included. 5 of the 7 were black cops. Let's move on down to Prince George's County. Last month, a black Prince George's County police officer was seen on WRC TV4 with a black hood covering his face and muffled voice hiding his ID. He was talking about the rampant racism on the Prince George's County Police Department. This is an example of the cops being scared of the cops. Where does that leave us? The most organized gang is a police department in our community. It is sometimes difficult to tell the difference between the cops and the thugs because sometimes they are one of the same. I have seen the good, bad, and ugly when it comes to law enforcement in the District, Maryland, and Virginia. And Peter Newsham is an ugly cop. There are some good cops out there. I have worked with many during the past 5 decades. The first black DC chief of police was a good cop. I'm talking about Bertels Jefferson. And my buddy, Assistant Chief of Police, he was one of 2 black administrators in the police department in the late 60s. And I'm talking about Chief Tillman O'Brien. He was a good cop. They were not scared of the community. The first D.C. Public Safety Director, Patrick Murphy, was a former commissioner of the New York City Police Department, was a good cop. He was known as the godfather of community relations. Wayne Davis, an FBI undercover agent, he and I worked closely together during the riots, trying to save lives. Wayne went on to become the director of the FBI field office in Detroit, and my high school teammate and my partner, Andrew Johnson, was a beat cop, one of the top homicide detectives during his days. He went on to become a DEA agent. He retired as a DEA supervisor. He chased bad guys all around the world. A good cop. So I know a good cop when I see one. You know, Mr. Murphy, he met with the roving leaders once a month to discuss ways of bringing the police and community together. We had much success. I have the documentation proving that success. But it would be hard to duplicate that same kind of success today. You no longer have roving leaders like the late Calvin Woodland or Theophilus Brooks. Cops spend more time in their cars than walking a beat and never get the opportunity to get to know their community. Their attitudes of us against them does not help. The reason we had so few deaths during the 1968 riots was because of the men I just mentioned. And last but by no means least, the first black mayor, Walter Washington, held his ground and said, hell no, not in my town and not my people, to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who wanted to shoot looters on sight in 1968. Mayor Bowser's appointment of Peter Newsom, you can welcome back the reincarnation of J. Edgar Hoover. April 6, 1967, 50 years ago, next month, Reverend Martin Luther King said, a time comes when silence is betrayal. And that time is now in 2017 in Washington, D.C. with this Marion Bowser and City Council. Marion Bowser and the City Council, our children's blood will be on your hands as it flows in the street with these cowboy cops under the command of Peter Newsom. You are betraying a whole community if you confirm Peter Newsom as your new chief. A police state is the last thing we need in the nation's capital, but that's where we're headed. I'm Harold Bell for the Legends of Inside Sports, and remember that every black face you see is not your brother, and every white face is not your enemy, and Donald Trump is not the problem. It's Marion Bowser in the D.C. City Council. You can color me gone. Have a great day.